Good morning, everyone. My name is Jennifer Bryant, and I'm with Project Equity. We're really happy to be on the planning committee for this summit today, and I am joined by Benjamin. And so for our first session, we're going to really dig into what is shared ownership. So we're going to be defining shared ownership and giving an introduction to both employee ownership and the collective ownership of real estate. While we fire this up, is it coming on? Okay. We're going to do a quick PowerPoint presentation, and while he's pointing that up, just some housekeeping. If you need to use the bathroom, it's out to the left past the elevators. And I wanted to point out that on the tables, we have 4 reports. And so we have a shared ownership workbook, an employee ownership workbook, a municipal tools report. We spoke to some of you in this room, folks in local government, about what policy levers the city of St. Paul can use to advance shared ownership and embed it within local government. And then we also have this report, which is a analysis of small businesses' challenges and the opportunity of employee ownership, specifically in St. Paul. So to kick it off, this first session is defining shared ownership. Again, my name is Jennifer Bryant. I'm the program manager for the Black Employee Ownership Initiative at Project Equity, and I'll be co-presenting with Benjamin from Nexus Community Partners. Project Equity helps business owners preserve their company's legacies by transitioning to employee ownership. We also help business advisors and economic development professionals and local governments spread the word about employee ownership. Nexus Community Partners is a nonprofit intermediary that helps to build engaged and powerful communities of color. They bridge across sectors to bring together multiple stakeholders to create positive change in our communities. So for this first session, I'm going to kick it off by talking about employee ownership transitions, and then Benjamin will come up and talk to us about worker-owned cooperative startups, community-owned real estate, and the St. Paul Local Fund. So to begin, what is employee ownership? Employee ownership is an arrangement where employees own shares in a business through capital accounts or profit sharing. Businesses can be employee owned from the beginning, or they can transition to employee ownership when an owner sells their business to employees in whole or in part. And if you go to Project Equity's website, we have a whole bunch of ownership stories, and you can see that some of these businesses, like Proof Bakery, which is a 100% cooperative. The owner converted 100% of the business to employee ownership, but there are others where the owner may only convert 30% of the business to employee ownership. And so there's a lot of flexibility in how this model can be used. There are 3 primary forms of broad-based employee ownership. The first is employee stock ownership plans, or ESOPs, and these are retirement plans that own all or part of a company on behalf of its employees. This is the largest form of employee ownership in the United States. There are a lot of huge businesses that many of us probably use all the time that are employee owned, like Cliff Bars, Publix grocery stores. These are ESOPs. Then there are worker-owned cooperatives. These are wholly owned by the employee owners who share in profits and elect, serve, and or serve on the board of directors. Worker-owned cooperatives usually feature democratic governance in addition to collective ownership. And so one of the sessions that we're going to have today, we're going to hear from members of worker-owned cooperatives, local worker-owned cooperatives. And the third form of employee ownership is employee ownership trust, also known as EOTs. These are a more customizable form of employee ownership that can be adapted to incorporate democratic principles and profit sharing. Let's go. So in the workbook, this one with the teal cover, it goes a little bit deeper into each of these forms of employee ownership. I'll just give a brief overview here. But in a worker-owned cooperative, it's one member, one vote. They have a board of directors that's primarily made up of employee owners. There's a profit sharing model via patronage that's based on hours worked. And so a lot of times in a worker-owned cooperative, the workers will have an individual capital account that all of their profits will go into, and it's helping to build wealth for the workers. This can be organized as a cooperative or an LLC, but it's a flexible business form, and there are tax benefits to being a cooperative. An ESOP is a qualified retirement plan like a 401k, but it's invested primarily in the stock of the company. Employees do not pay for their ownership stake, whereas in worker-owned cooperatives, there's usually a small buy-in amount that that workers pay to become a member of the cooperative. And there are significant tax benefits to become an ESOP, but there's also a lot of regulatory compliance, which is why ESOPs are usually a form that's best for larger businesses. So we recommend that if a business is going to convert to an ESOP, that they have at least 40 employees. Lastly, the employee ownership trust. A trust holds some or all of the shares of the company on behalf of the employees. It is all of the employees are members of the ownership group. Again, employees do not pay for their ownership stake, and they're represented in the governing bodies of the business. So why does employee ownership matter now? Evan touched on this a bit in his opening remarks, but in the data study report that is on the table, we pulled data that shows that over half of the privately held businesses with employees in Minnesota are owned by baby boomers. And so a lot of these folks are going to be retiring over the next 10 years. Again, that's called the silver tsunami. And so we did a data breakdown of which industries those businesses are in. And there's significant opportunity for these businesses to be transitioned to employee ownership in order to protect these jobs, to keep these businesses in the community, and to preserve the legacy of the selling owner. So let's talk a little bit about the benefits of employee ownership. The benefits to the selling owner: they get market price for the business, they get to retain influence on the pacing and exit timeline for when they may decide to stay on for a period after they sell the business to their employees, or they may choose to exit. And again, they get to preserve the company's legacy. Employee ownership also benefits the business itself. According to data from the National Center for Employee Ownership, employee-owned businesses have an 8.5% higher profit margin than their peers, and they also tend to grow 2% faster per year. And then lastly, employee ownership benefits workers, and we'll hear a bit more during the worker ownership panel later, but workers at employee-owned businesses tend to have 33% higher wages than their peers, 53% longer job tenure, and 92% higher household net worth, according again to the National Center for Employee Ownership. So before I end, I want to talk briefly about the employee ownership transition process. So at Project Equity, we have a 5-stage process. It begins by exploration, and so we do a lot of webinars and events like this to talk to business owners, just to introduce employee ownership as an exit option and or as a growth option for their business. If a business owner is interested, then we do a free consultation call with them. The next stage is to do a feasibility study where we do a deep dive into the valuation of the business, the management capacity, timeline, et cetera. The third step is the transition. That's where we structure, create the new structure for the new employee-owned business, and that includes the governance, the management, the seller's role, et cetera. Then we finance the transaction and close the deal, and then we have a program called Thrive where we continue to work with the new employee owners for 2 years after their transition to ensure that the business is successful. This goes a little bit into the sale of the business and how that works. So first we begin by choosing which form of employee ownership, whether that be a worker-owned cooperative or an employee ownership trust or an ESOP. And then the sales price and the deal terms are finalized. We work with our partners like Shared Capital and others to attain a loan for the business. We also have a Catalyst Fund where we finance these transactions, and then the loan is paid off over time through future revenue. So these are essentially leveraged buyouts, and so the employees themselves do not have to put up their own collateral or put up their own capital. So what changes when a business becomes employee-owned? The day-to-day operations of the business do not change. The management of the business doesn't change, although some people may shift roles if the owner decides to exit, but we help set all of that up when we're structuring the transaction. The governance does change, so a board of directors is established or expanded, and of course, ownership changes because it moves from having the previous owner to all of the employees, some or all of the employees being owners. Lastly, how do you know if the business is a good fit for employee ownership? We recommend, we're ideally looking for businesses that have 10 or more employees. Again, ESOPs are typically better for larger businesses, so we look for 40 or more employees. The company should be profitable for the last 5 years. It should be an established business, and it should have minimal debt, which is important for the transaction. And with that, I'll turn it over to Benjamin to talk about worker-owned cooperatives. See you, Dan.
Yeah, so again, I'm Benjamin Tsai. I'm the director of the Shared Ownership Center at Nexus. And so we do support co-op conversions like Project Equity, but we also do support startups of worker co-ops. And interestingly, they actually are still the majority of the new worker co-ops in the U.S., according to the last study from Dowie. So they are a significant entry point for worker ownership. Of course, we support them on a limited basis because they are, I want to acknowledge startups are challenged enough. And so we do try to sort of make sure that they're ready and primed for success before we take them on. But there's several benefits to startups. You can, when you're doing a startup by yourself, it's really a lot of work, it's a lot of burden on a single person. But with a co-op, by its nature, you have to have co-founders, so you can share the work, you can share your knowledge, get a lot more people to the table to get these projects off the ground. Also, with a startup, sort of as opposed to a conversion, you can move into a new space. You're not taking on an existing business model and trying new things, so it's space for innovation. You're not doing a buyout, so you don't have blue sky and other intangibles that you're buying. And then the benefits to the employees in the long run, if it's a success, are similar to the conversions. So better retention, better wages, better benefits, et cetera. So as I was saying, startups, want to fully acknowledge they are super hard. I've done a few, and they have their own challenges that are different than conversions. So we do want to really check in with folks. We're looking for motivated co-founders who have hopefully the ability to contribute some sweat equity, because oftentimes there's not enough funding to just pay people out of the gate. Relevant industry experience, a good concept already, and really, that they're already in community. They have networks to pull, to bring in and help get these things off the ground. So, and that includes hopefully some connections to capital. And so, that's pretty much, just wanted to introduce startups in addition to conversions. And then shift gears into the other work we do at the Shared Ownership Center, which is community-owned real estate. And this
there are many models of community-owned real estate, and I want to acknowledge that they're growing across the country and people are experimenting constantly. So it's a little bit hard to pin down exactly, all the different flavors of it. But in my mind, they all sort of share general characteristics. I mean, they should be accessible to community members. So that means affordability and some form of, membership that they can access or ownership that they can access. And once they're in, there should be inclusive decision-making options so that everybody has some say in the governance of the project. And that all of those members also share economic values and benefits from the project. So that could be profit sharing or access to more affordable space, and just the general benefit of a more vibrant community. As I was saying, I mean, this is a growing area across the country, but we do see a few models that are really more common. We have real estate cooperatives, examples being Northeast Investment Co-op, which was actually one of the first ones in the country as far as we know. And since then, there have been a couple more in the region, Taproot, Ignite, Business Women Investment Group, to name some, and some of them will be speaking on a panel later today, so you'll get to learn more about them. And real estate co-ops are also growing across the country and very diverse. You can look them up. There's really exciting projects out in the Bay Area and really across the country, but we're going to focus on some regional examples later. Also, community land trusts. Definitely a really classic example. We have Rondo and Community of Lakes Land Trust here in the Twin Cities. And Rondo, they do both residential and commercial projects. So they're covering a lot of those bases. And then one other example that as far as I know hasn't launched quite yet here in Minnesota, but community investment trusts. I know they're in the works, but the example currently that's operational is it's a Mercy Corps sort of model, but they have a CIT running out in Portland, Oregon. So you can check that out if you want. But for today, I was mainly going to just focus on these real estate investment co-ops because that's what we do at Nexus, and it's sort of a growing model that we just think is really exciting, and just sort of just build out one example of community ownership for y'all. In essence, these are co-ops where community members and or business tenants organize to co-own real estate, and we use this term specific to commercial and mixed use real estate. Sort of as opposed to housing co-ops, which I consider a much different sector and much different model. So we're going to focus on commercial and mixed use as when we call these things real estate investment co-ops. But in essence, their goal is to provide affordable and stable places for business, local businesses, and residents when it's mixed use. And like all co-ops, the core of it is that they are democratically owned and controlled. So in this case, the co-op would own the commercial real estate, and the community members and or business tenants own the co-op. And we do have some models here like IBWIG, which is solely business owners owning the co-op, and they basically lease from the co-op an affordable space at a shopping center out in Brooklyn Park or Brooklyn Center. Also, there's this control element. The members of these co-ops, they have a vote in the governance, so they generally elect the board. They vote on really important critical decisions for the long-term sort of strategy of the co-op. And again, sort of one member, one vote. So everyone has the same amount of power. You can't buy more shares and get more power, at least controlling shares. And let's see. So speaking of member buy-in, we've seen a range of, currently it's actually about 500 to 1,000 to buy into these, and that gets you your voting share. There are some projects on deck where they're going to hopefully aim more at $10 to $100. But again, you are buying a common stock in this co-op. That gets you your vote, right, to profit shares potentially. And the sort of the additional component that's really unique here is that once you're a member of a real estate co-op, you can also buy preferred shares, which are non-voting, but they give you a potential access to additional returns. So you can get dividends if the co-op is profitable. So there are a lot of benefits to these real estate co-ops. I mean, they are values-driven businesses in essence, and they are very much about anti-displacement, decreasing extraction, stability and affordability, and wealth building. And so, as with many things, you can't necessarily maximize all of these at once. You have to balance them, against each other a little bit. And so oftentimes we try to emphasize that while community wealth building from dividends is definitely a focus, it's not about maximizing return as far as dollars. Wealth is really a broad concept that includes not only money, but just quality of life, So these projects really try to cover all of the bases at once. And we, as far as what we bring to the table to support these projects, we basically try to bring all of the players together and coordinate both the community members, neighborhood organizations, and other professional service providers that are really necessary to make these successful. Specifically, we try to focus on governance design, organizational development, connecting them with capital, and other sort of technical like feasibility analysis and financial scans and stuff. So with that, we also wanted to raise up one awesome example of a program that is supporting both worker co-ops and real estate or community-owned real estate. And as you've heard, the city of St. Paul stepped up and accessed some ARPA funding to start the local fund, which launched earlier this year. And Nexus is basically, we're helping sort of implement it. And the program will run through September 2026. And it has two sides. So there's the worker ownership side, which is going to support both existing co-ops, conversions, and startups. And then there's the community ownership side, which is like the real estate focused side, which is going to support all different kinds of community-owned real estate projects with both technical assistance and grants. And I'll break those down just a little bit more. As far as the worker ownership program, it supports eligible worker co-ops with technical assistance on both business and financial planning services and the establishment of the cooperative business structure, so incorporation. And it also can bring grants to either expansions or startups, emergency financial hardship assistance from COVID. The ARPA money is all focused around COVID relief. And also construction grants for the rehabilitation of commercial properties. And one really cool, unique thing for us is stipends for these new co-op members who are doing the startups and the conversions. And then on the community ownership or real estate side, we have technical assistance again, where we bring a lot of education on co-op governance models, but for Nexus, it's specific to real estate investment co-ops. But we are happy to try to partner and bring in other expertise as needed. We also work with other professional providers for feasibility studies and financial scans that are really specific to commercial real estate. And then it also brings grants for 2 levels: pre-development, so that's all your sort of like legal, due diligence, architects, environmental. There's just a ton of work that's needed to get like a commercial property off the ground. And there's also grants for acquisition, demolition, and rehabilitation. I do want to talk a little bit about eligibility though, because it's coming through ARPA. There are quite a few sort of requirements, and for the worker owner side, I'm not gonna speak to all of the eligibility requirements because that will take quite some time, but I'm gonna do a few highlights, and we can share this slide deck when we're done, so if you want to read this. It's also on our website. But in essence, for the worker owner side, we're looking for St. Paul residents to be involved, and that these are incorporated in St. Paul. And typically, they either need to be in a qualified census tract or meet SBA disadvantaged business qualifications. And on the community ownership side, again, we're looking for St. Paul residents to be involved, that they're incorporated in St. Paul, but they also need to be focused on commercial properties that are on the city's vacant building list and also located in a qualified census tract in St. Paul. So those are some of the eligibility requirements. Definitely check out our website for more information. And it's a rolling basis. People are welcome to reach out to us to learn more. The contact is on our website. There's a link here. But if you go to our website and go look under the Shared Ownership Center, you'll be able to find the local fund. And so, yeah, if you all know of groups in your neighborhoods that are looking to do projects like this, definitely tell them about what we're doing and feel free to tell them to get in touch. So we did want, if there's time, to take questions. Is there time? Okay. Yeah, any questions? Yeah. You work with traditional banks, Patch? Yeah, oftentimes we're working with the CDFIs. So, for example, Shared Capital was mentioned already, and also MCCD is doing lending for shared ownership models. There are some, I believe Acer might have had a traditional bank involved in one of their deals. But oftentimes, is that right? Yeah. Yes, okay. So there are they usually partner with other CDFIs though, because they have much more stringent requirements, and some of the terms that they set are a little bit more onerous. So there's, when possible, typically, where we haven't engaged with traditional banks quite as much.